Awesome. So we are recording. Yeah, so today I'm joined with Luca Turrini, the founder of Outrun Cancer, who hopefully is going to pop up in a second. He's hiding from me.
Hello.
I was wondering how long you're going to leave me hanging then.
I think it's
Um,
beautiful enough that you can literally spend hours just looking out. Especially today, strangely, is one of the first few days that there are no waves, so it's actually extremely flat. So
mm,
it's normally very very wavy. So being on the ocean and stuff, but it's incredibly flat and calm. So
Amazing. I'm very jealous sat here in my kitchen.
how are you?
Um, yeah, very good, very good. So yeah, I let me start by, I suppose, introducing you a bit more and how we met. So we were introduced by Mark Green of the Body Mechanic, who's my coach, and has been putting me together for the last couple of years and repairing me, along with Pete Sweeney. So first of all, a big shout to them. But yeah, Mark introduced me to you probably 6 months or so after I told him I wanted to run from Brisbane to Sydney, and he said, okay, I think it's time for me to introduce you to Luca now. And I was like, okay, I wonder what that means. And then he told me about, I suppose, some of the things that you'd done, including your 24-hour treadmill record, and running multiple marathons in a day, the Spartathlon that you've done, a few of your 24-hour races. So I was like, okay, this guy knows what he's talking about. And then we had a chat, and you basically told me all the little nooks and crannies that I should be thinking about, and some things that I hadn't even thought about. So first of all, yeah, massive thanks in helping in, I suppose, the preparation for Brisbane to Sydney, even though it's been postponed.
Well, I think you're being too generous, and no, it was a pleasure. I mean, speaking to you at the time, I remember being excited. So the other thing also, yeah, Mark is a really good friend, and when he asked me things like this, like I don't know, you should chat to Mark, or he introduced me to Troy, who is also now doing his big challenge as well. And
Yeah,
yeah, I know I should listen, and I should try to share my experience, just because yeah, Mark has been amazing also to share his experiences, his knowledge with me. So he kept me running healthy for so many years now, that every time I can give something back, I'm happy. But it was generally, if you remember that conversation, I think we were meant to catch up for 10 minutes, and then I remember I was in Sydney and we spoke for half an hour or
yeah.
even longer, and I was super excited. I was like, oh man, I wish I could be with you. And I was actually hoping to run with you on this, I mean, across Byron Bay. But again, as you
Yeah.
say, you just postponed the marathons. So I'm looking
Yeah.
forward to you. We will be running through here. So I'm not gonna make it easy
Amazing.
for you. So when we run across Byron, I'm gonna get you to run on the beach if you want, and over a couple of hills. But it's gonna be fun.
Yeah, so yeah, I suppose for people listening, Luca is running the 21 half marathons in 21 days with me, as well as Troy, who you're training to run from Perth to Sydney, and I'm catching up with him on a call next week as well.
Oh,
Um,
fantastic.
but yeah, why don't we start with, so you founded Outrun Cancer. Do you want to just tell us, I suppose, um, why you started running, and then how it led to, I suppose, you founding Outrun Cancer?
Yeah, it's an interesting story. I'll try to give you the short version, but essentially, I moved to Sydney in 2008 at the peak of the global financial crisis, and I found myself basically at home, not able to find a job. I literally moved to Australia in October 2008, and I work in IT in a pretty specialized area. So it was impossible for me to find work, and I found myself very, very stressed. And I used to be a heavy smoker, heavy drinker, And my neighbor literally just said, well, I see you are super stressed. Just come out for a run with me. And at the time I was living in Cremont Point, and I managed to run down to the end of reserve. So probably 1.5 kilometers from my home. And I thought I was going to die. And basically I came back, and then the next day I was like, okay, I want to do this again. So I tried before to quit smoking. Long story short, I started running, quit smoking pretty much right away. And it was a way for me to basically just keep my maybe mental health in order, because it was very stressful. I mean, I just left the UK and just moved to Australia, couldn't find a job. And I started running, and yeah, I just did a 5K, 10K, and a couple of half marathons. And then my mom got sick of pancreatic cancer. And basically in a matter of 6 months, she passed away. And at that time, I started running a little bit longer distances, but nothing big, just really half marathons. But I found that by running was my only way to not only find peace for what was happening within myself, but also to sum up the courage to pick up the phone at night and call her. So I started running, and essentially going, as the disease progressed, going longer and longer, just because it would just take me longer and longer to process my emotions. And it was also an escape, obviously, to go out in the bush. And then if you're running and crying, nobody can hear you. So that's what I kind of used to do. And then my mom passed away in March of 2011. And something a little bit weird happened, that essentially I just wanted to say a few words at the funeral. And the priest at the church said, okay, before you go, you need to talk to me, and then just want to make sure that what you're saying. And essentially, I just wanted to pass on a couple of messages about the importance of time, what it really means being strong, lessons that I learned from my mom, and also the importance of preventing cancer. Because ultimately, for me, winning the race against cancer is not getting cancer in the first place. And I have to mention also that before my mom got diagnosed of pancreatic cancer, I had no idea what cancer was. And I always thought that cancer is something that happens to other people. And then as you do, unfortunately, as you do when you are in a position of stress, you start looking into it. And then all of a sudden, I found myself just reading and discovering things that for me were quite obvious and that everybody should be aware of. And so I felt very strong about this prevention message, because the last thing I really wanted is to see that all the pain my mom went through would just be acknowledged as something that just happens. And the priest, I understand why he said what he said, and I'm actually very happy that he did say so, but essentially said, oh, I'm sorry, you can't really say that in my church. If you want, you can say that cancer is a terrible disease that with the help of God, we can overcome. So I got furious, and I said, okay, I'm not going to talk about cancer in your church, but I'm going to do something to basically raise awareness, because I felt very, very strong that there was an important message there. And essentially that day, I decided to go back to Italy the following year, and in honor of my mom, running one marathon in each of the 20 Italian regions in a month, and to start this Outrun Cancer not-for-profit, which basically the goal of Outrun Cancer is to raise awareness and funds for specific cancer prevention projects and talk about cancer prevention in general. And again, at the time, I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't know what fundraising was. And so I started, that it was a long, long journey. I had no idea also how to train. Unfortunately, at the time, I didn't know Mark. Um,
Yeah.
and honestly, I did all the mistakes. I made all the mistakes on the book, and
Yeah.
I got super injured, and I got to know Mark only because I got injured after the 20 marathons. But that's another story. But
Yeah.
essentially, for Outrun Cancer, just before I went away, so my initial goal was to raise 50 grand for a prevention project with Cancer Council. And then basically just before going away, because I worked at that time in Sydney, I wanted to find an event, create an event that I could share with all my colleagues. So we came up with this idea of running a marathon as a team on treadmill. And basically, I sent out an email to a few friends in my company, and then literally in 4 days, we had 90 people basically running on treadmills, so taking turns to complete a marathon in under 4 hours. So teams can be between 4 and 21 people, and I was blown away by the success. We raised $28,000 in one afternoon, and we never stopped since. So we are close to $1 million. This year was the year that we're gonna break $1 million, but unfortunately all my events have been canceled. But in the meanwhile, we raised a lot of money for different projects and involved a lot of corporates, and I made some wonderful friends. And I guess Outrun Cancer also is so close to my heart that when I do any running challenge under with the heart of Outrun Cancer, then it gives me superpowers. So the two things basically then kind of melted together. But yeah, that's pretty much the story.
A very, I suppose, a sad story, but an amazing story as well. And thanks so much for sharing. There's so many different things I want to talk about along that whole journey. Can we, I suppose, firstly, just go back to, I suppose, when you were, running these longer and longer distances, and I think one of the things you said was you were using it to process your thinking. So you were literally going out and running on your own, or were you running with people? And it was just for you to process it yourself.
Just on my own. Yeah, I had a friend with whom I was able to share a little bit what I was going through, but it was mostly by myself. Yeah, and literally I will just go out until basically I cried enough, and until my legs I couldn't take it anymore. Because what I found, at least for me, is that there is one point normally after 2 or 3 hours where your brain gives up. It says, okay, cool, that's it, that's what we're doing now. And I find it very hard to go out with a problem in my head and come back. If I go for a long run, if I have something that I really need to get over or think about, I go for a long run. And then when I come back 90 times out of 100, I kind of got things back in perspective. So, and that's honestly how I started. And it was just taking longer and longer to get to that state of peace. And but mostly on my own. Yeah.
Okay. Because I suppose one thing about that, I suppose, it sounds as though you were going out and asking the right question initially, which was, and I don't know, this is a question in itself, but I suppose if you went out on a long run and you had a negative question, you'd have a very different answer to what can I do from this that can really support people. And I suppose it links back to, what you were saying before about you really want that message to go out. So was the question more around how can I use this to help other people, or?
Yeah, it was a little bit of both. So when my mom got sick, it was mostly about me trying to process it. And then when I decided that I was gonna raise funds, then I started running long and just basically going brainstorming mode of how can I make this work, and also overcome the self-limited belief of myself. I just wanted to know that when I committed to run 20 marathons in Italy, I never ran a marathon in my whole life. And I just went on, and I had no idea how I was going to pull it off. I had no idea how to basically pay for the travel and all of that. So yeah, and so the long runs were actually just to try things out and just play some things in my mind and see whether or not they stick. So I'm a big believer in visualization. I tend to do that a lot when I go out running. So you probably you do the same. It's just you go through so many images and so many ways how things could turn out, and then there is one or two that they stick. So you keep basically building on that. So yeah, that's pretty much what I want. But also at the time, I was not in a position to be able to share my emotions with anyone. Yeah, and again, that's a problem.
So you used running as a kind of, because it sounds, I suppose, similar to me in a way, where I was using running as a coping mechanism for me to sort my own head out first before I could then go and speak to people. Is that fair?
Yeah, it is fair. I guess there is an addition that, for the lack of a better word, I had a lot of rage, and running was my way to get it out of my system. So that's rage and dissatisfaction and a lot of negative emotions that by running them out, you kind of need to get them out of your system, otherwise like you can't run. So that was again is a coping mechanism, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And so at what point did you feel as though you could actually talk to people, and I suppose include people in the conversation that you were having in your head?
Much later, I must admit. I've always gave the light version of why Outrun Cancer exists, because I found myself that after the first year, of Outrun Cancer, which basically I winged the whole thing, and it happened. The second year, I didn't really want to do anything under the brand of Outrun Cancer. And then the gym where we ran the first event, they came back to me and said, oh, it was so successful, everyone's so happy, everyone is still asking me when we're going to do it again. So we did it the second year. And then, and again, up until that point, it was still my own thing. So I guess after 2 or 3 years, I managed to, firstly, I realized that I really wanted for Outrun Cancer to be something more than me running, I had to basically just share why it exists and why, I think the core principles and values of Outrun Cancer. So at that point, I started to share a little bit more about the why, and also sharing things that enraged me and things that I really wanted to go through. But it took me quite a few years, and and even now is much better, because I'm a bit more comfortable to show vulnerable sides of myself. But it took me quite a few years. Plus, I'm not getting emotional anymore when I discuss this. While before, I was just a mess. So,
and do you think that's the result of sharing?
Probably is. Yeah, it is. It's funny because we keep it inside, and but now that I'm a bit more comfortable in sharing, then I feel much better. Yeah.
Oh, awesome. And thank you so much for sharing, because I was sort of trying to sort of understand that journey, because you're right, sometimes, especially, when I'm telling my story as well. I must admit, when people ask me, "Oh, why are you doing Brisbane to Sydney?" and I'll joke about it sometimes and just say, "Oh, it's just my midlife crisis,"
Yeah.
as a bit of a joke, but then I caught myself doing it a few times, and so wanted to then take a step back and think, well, no, actually, you're doing this for a reason, and you're kind of copping out by joking around sometimes.
Yeah, but I think also that there is a moment and moment. I think there are both sides. They are valid, and there are people that you can share it with, and there are people that get it because you say it straight as it is. Other people that can get intimidated. So it really depends. You need to also adjust the message, I guess, depending on the person that you have in front of you sometimes, or at least that was my experience.
I didn't want to break the conversation, but your picture has frozen. So I didn't want to interrupt the flow because it was going well. So
let me see if I can get it back up.
Yep, cool. Perfect. There you are again.
Yeah.
It was stuck on a nice view anyway.
This is just to show that it's real.
Yeah. Exactly. So I'd love to sort of transition now into, because you mentioned the treadmill challenge that you do, and getting close to that 1 million mark. And then so your world record on a treadmill, which just sounds ridiculous, of 261.18 kilometers.
Yep.
Why?
So now this will come as a funny note, but so the first ever treadmill marathon that we did. So when I pitched it to the gym, she said, "Okay, fantastic, but if we get people running, you should run a marathon by yourself on a treadmill because then it's a better story." And I said, "Yeah, sure." So I ran a marathon on a treadmill, and he almost killed me. I was so cooked by the end of it, and then I remember just saying, "Oh, I'll never do this again." And then a light bulb went off, and I thought, "Oh, I wonder what's the furthest distance anyone has ever run on a treadmill." And at that time, and I Googled it, and at that time it was 250 kilometers or something along those lines. And I remember I recorded it, and within myself, I thought, one day I'll do it. And in 2015, I did 24 hours on treadmill in Martin Place to raise funds. That wasn't a world record attempt. Was just to see whether I could do it. It was a fantastic. We raised $100,000, and it was a fantastic fundraising event. We were in Martin Place, so it was spectacular. And by that time, it almost killed me. I remember I did 210 kilometers, but during the night, it was just atrocious. It was awful. And
so what time did you start and finish?
We started at 9:30 a.m. and we finished at 9:30 a.m. the next day during the week, because again, the idea was to get noticed by the different corporates in Martin Place. But man, it was really hard, especially during the night. I remember I was hanging on the treadmill. I didn't know what to do. And again, I had no idea of nutrition and so on. But again, I've done it. And then I said, never again. And then the next day I was like, maybe one day. And
that sounds similar to UTA.
Exactly.
You finish, never again. And then not even the next day, an hour later when you're having a beer, right, we're doing this again next year.
Yeah, when is the early bird? And then in 2017, I decided that I was gonna go for it. And the reason why I decided, because I think I cracked the code. So I enrolled a male team of 12 runners and a female team of 12 runners to run alongside me. So in 2 different treadmills, and also both of them going for the Guinness World Record. And these are people that I respect, and are all my running idols. And I thought, if I asked them to come and run, surely I need to step up and step up my game as well. So otherwise I will look stupid. So there were the likes of Ben St. Lawrence and so many other, fantastic athletes that I wouldn't normally get the opportunity to run with. And so we made it. So on that day, we got 3 Guinness World Records. So mine on 24 hours, 261.18. And then the male team, 424 kilometers. So is about 20 marathons. And then the women, they had 365 kilometers. So my record has been broken since. And the male and the female teams ones are still basically Aussie. So we still got 2 out of 3. So fantastic. But it was fun.
I've seen the video. It didn't look fun. But so you said before when I suppose you started ultra running, it was mainly fueled by rage. What motivates you now, and how has that motivation changed over the years?
I must admit, this is still a question that I'm asking myself. I'm going through at the moment a transition between rage and kindness, probably, or definitely I'm trying to transition out of rage. Up until recently, I've been running on rage, and I think in the long haul, it hasn't really helped me. Not always running on rage, but I don't race much. I like doing my own thing, but lots of time I used to go out because I just needed to get something out of my system, and now I'm trying to transition. So and I've realized that only recently, but now I'm still in the process of working out what it is that fuel me. For example, the run that I'm doing now with you during these 21 days is fueling me of good emotion, and also I'm taking purposely the time every morning to think. So a small insight about myself, and sometimes I share them, sometimes I keep it for myself, but I'm trying to a little bit to be directed with a positive energy. Let's put it that way.
I love it. You definitely exude positivity. So you, I think you're doing a great job.
Working hard. Not sure if we get that, but work in progress.
Awesome. So I wanted to finish by asking you some quick fire questions.
Okay.
Favorite race?
The one that I haven't finished, the Spartathlon.
You're gonna go back?
Absolutely. Yeah. So that's been my favorite race. Just because I've finished it. So I'm gonna go back. Hopefully next year. We'll see.
Awesome.
Well,
awesome.
Depends. I need to ask my wife first. So Lydia. Do you mind if I go back?
Well, that's another good point. When you text me the other day to say, what was it, the night before we started the 21, saying I've just told my wife. Do you listen to anything when you run?
Most of the time, no, really. I now use some music, maybe the last part of runs, but I find I just get too excited with music. So
I'm the same. How many pairs of running shoes do you own?
Accordingly to my wife, 9. Accordingly to me, just 1. Now I have multiple. Now I got some problems finding right shoes. So when I find a pair that I like, I buy quite a few of them. So yeah, I probably
Yeah.
have 6 or 7.
Who has had the biggest influence on your life so far?
I think at different stages, different people.
Yeah.
This is gonna be, so when I was growing up, around the age of 16, I was very inspired, if you want, um, uh, by my sister's boyfriend, Lorenzo, who basically died on a car accident. And he was all I thought a grown up. He was 20, and it was all I thought a grown up person would be. I remember I look up to him because, well, I never had an older brother. And he was pretty tough guy. He went to the army, went to Somalia, and he was a parachuter. And you know, a skinny little guy like me. At that time, at 16, everyone is just, I don't know. It was a different era, and for me, he was the one to imitate, and he inspired me for many years to basically, and maybe that's where my rage kind of started, because his attitude was a little bit dominant. He was taking things on, and that was my attitude for several years, in just yeah, fake it until you make it kind of thing, and just play it bigger than you are. And it served me well in a lot of things. Then I think the inspiration sort of moved to my mom. Not as much about my mom, but about the fire that she managed to instill on me in actually understanding that there are things bigger than ourselves, and pursue that. And then recently I have a friend that is really helping me transition between emotional state that is an inspiration for me. So yeah, different stages of my life, different people. Wow, that was intense.
That was. It wasn't a quick fire, but it was a, I suppose, an amazing response. And thanks again for being so open, Luca. And lastly, your favorite quote.
From Richard Bach: everyone, every moment in your life is there because you attracted it to yourself.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Cool. Well, yeah, I'd just like to finish again by saying thank you so much for being so open. I think what you're doing with the Outrun Cancer charity is just amazing. I'm sure you're going to smash through that 1 million goal, and I really look forward to, I suppose, joining you on some of these running adventures.
I think I'm going to be the one joining you. So yeah, and honestly, thank you for what you are doing as well. And I think, yeah, it's stepping up to the cause, whatever it is, to the call. Whatever it is, it doesn't matter. The important thing is stepping up, and you are proving that. And yeah, you've been one of the few feeds that I'm constantly looking at. So thank you. And thank you for actually allowing me to be part of these 21 days, honestly.
Oh, mate, it's an honor. Yeah, I was, you're someone like, I suppose, most people that I'm interviewing, you're sort of heroes to me in a way, where before, when I was looking at my run, I was looking up to people, and you all helped me out. So I really appreciate it.
But I'm going to be mean to you, and I'm going to show you where I live.
Well,
and then tomorrow morning, I'm going to run through here.
That's not fair. Well, thanks again, Luca, and I'll speak to you again. I'll see you tomorrow morning.
Okay, see you tomorrow. Ciao, ciao.
Take care, mate. Bye.
Yeah.